Come on, mate. Cheers, mate. This.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Dave. Today we're going to look at servicing the SPUR gear drive. These are really hard to get on. It's not going to look elegant. If you're out fashioning your board on a regular basis, chances are your drivetrain could use some TLC. Hard riding puts the drives through a lot. The grease will need replacing, the gears will become worn and they may have moved. So ways to tell if your board needs a service on the gears. First of all, the backlash or the movement in the gears will be quite a lot, like this wheel is here. The drivetrain might be loud. This one's quite loud. Or you can, well, it is just the loudness, isn't it, really, I suppose. So the tools you'll need for this job: a T20 Torx driver, 16mm spanner for the wheel, 3mm Allen key, again for the bolts around the wheel, and an 8mm spanner. So we're going to start by removing the wheel. First thing we're going to do, take the dust cap off, deflate the tyre. Next, remove the axle nut. Then we're going to loosen these 5 bolts in here. We don't need to take them all the way out, just need to make sure they're free from the slave pulley. So once all these are loose, the wheel should turn freely on the axle whenever we're ready to remove it. Should slide straight off, leaving the O-ring, internal spacer and bearing on the axle. They can be removed. Now we just want to pull off this V-ring seal. I'll put that to one side. Now we're ready to take out the 4 screws that hold on the cover on the tub. For this you'll need the T20 Torx. It's just 4 screws around the edge. These might be tough to remove because they're probably glued in. So now we can remove the cover. And take out the slave pulley. So now we've got all this apart, you can see it's covered in grease. All of this grease really needs to be removed so we can inspect both the motor pulley and the slave pulley. So first thing we're going to do is get some blue roll. I'm just going to wipe off the excess amount of grease. Look at it, juicy. So now we've cleaned off most of the grease, I'm just going to have a closer look at the slave pulley. Try and get a toothbrush or something to clean out inside of the teeth. When I get all of that built up stuff out of there, you can see the profile of the teeth if you look at it dead on. And that's important to make sure your teeth aren't damaged, that you haven't got thin teeth. Look at if there's fatter ones or thinner ones. This pulley looks really good, so we're going to use this one. But if there's any signs of wear on one side more than the other, then you'll need to replace the slave pulley. Now for an interlude.
Oh no.
Welcome back. So now we've cleaned all this up, we're ready to apply new grease. But before we do that, I want to talk about the backlash because now's the time to do it before we re-grease. So to start off with, we're going to get our 8mm spanner and we're going to loosen the 4 bolts on the inside of the truck here. This will allow the motor to move backwards and forwards, shortening or lengthening the backlash. Right, so now we've loosened them off, you can see how much that slides up and down, increasing or decreasing the backlash between the motor pulley and the slave gear here. I'm going to pop the slave pulley back in. If you just lift the motor side, that should slide in nice and easy. And then now while we're here, we need something to put in between these gears to make sure we get the right amount of play. So for that, I'm just going to take a slice of paper. I'm just going to fold it 2 times back on itself. Then you need to be about 15mm wide, just enough to tuck in here. So once you've slid your paper in, you can just turn the slave wheel until it starts to get in between the gears there. So after that's inserted and you're happy with it, get the wheel back. We're putting this on to ensure that the slave wheel stays true on the axle, and it's going to sit exactly how it's going to sit once the wheel's all back together. So we just put that on like that. We'll get the axle nut, just slide that on, and we're going to do up all 5 of these to the slave pulley, and then do up the axle nut all the way so that it's tight, everything's tight up together. So now we've got the wheel back on, just going to make sure the paper's definitely between the slave and the motor pulley, and I'm going to just grab a rubber mallet or something like that, just give it a few taps in to make sure it's compressed that paper between the teeth. Once that's done, just going to pinch up one of these bolts on the back and then starting to tighten it all up. So once you've done all that and it's all tightened back up, it should be hard to turn the wheel while the paper's in between the gears. Once it gets past the paper, it should turn freely and you should be able to feel the backlash that you've put into it. See, it's just a tiny rock now compared to a large rock what it was before. That's correct backlash for these gears. Now we're going to take the wheel back off so we can get the slave pulley out, re-grease all the gears up, put it all back together and be ready to go. Sweet. So now we've got the wheel back off. We can remove the slave pulley and take our bit of paper out. Now we're on to greasing the pulleys. What do you want? So the importance of the grease on the pulley is lubrication first and foremost. It'll give you good life in both the slave pulley and the motor pulley. Second is actually acoustics, so it will sound dampen. And then third, its water resistance is going to keep all the moisture off your motor pulley and out of your drive system. This is the grease we recommend. It's Lucasol extra heavy duty grease. So the easiest way to apply, just get some on your finger, wipe it all over the pulley. In between all the teeth, there's no dry bits or gaps anywhere. Then we're ready to put it back onto the motor pulley. I'm just going to put a tiny bit on the motor pulley before we go in. And just spin it around with your fingers, get a little bit on there. Slide the slave pulley on. Be a little bit more difficult now we've set the backlash, but it will go in eventually. Okay, it's not going in. So now we've got the slave pulley back in. I'm just going to give it a few turns. You see how the grease kind of wants to bubble out where the motor pulley meets it. I'm just going to wipe that, try and get as much of it back in as possible. I'm going to grab some blue roll and just wipe the excess off this outside bit. That's where the V-ring seal sits. We don't really want that to be greasy on the inside. Right, so now it's putting the cover back on. Now we're going to put the rubber seal on. I'm just going to take a bit more blue roll, just wipe off any excess grease that's on there from before. And before we put it on, I'm just going to give it a little spray of WD-40, just so it runs smooth in that ridge around there. You might find if you don't use that, it might squeak or something, make a nasty sound. Putting it on, get it over the top first, and push in with your index fingers. And thumbs, slide it on. You can also give it a spin while you're doing this. It'll help get it in that outside ridge. And just make sure you haven't got anything sticking in. To get that out, just get a thin ruler. Just lift it out. Before we put the wheel on, you want your bearing on first, then your internal spacer, and then your O-ring. Yeah, we could put the bearing in the wheel if it's fell out, then we could put the wheel on. Right, sorry. Right, you ready? So we've got all the wheel back on. Last thing to do is just blow out the tyre. I'm not going to do that here. We'll just quickly recap what we've been over. So we've gone from stripping the whole system down to cleaning it, re-greasing and checking the backlash, Important things to remember about the Backlash is it's too tight, it's going to damage the gears. If it's too loose, it's going to damage the gears. So you want to get it just right using those 3 bits of paper. Other than that, fucking sad. And just so you know, we are going to clean this board, but first